All righty. Good morning. Welcome to the second day of Unreal Fest Orlando. And yeah, give it a clap. Here we're talking about the future of animation retargeting Unreal. My name is Greg Richardson. I am a senior technical product manager here at Epic Games, focusing on animation retargeting and sequencer. Obviously, I'll be talking about animation retargeting. And yeah, so what is animation retargeting? Well, just as a raise of hands, how many of you are familiar with animation retargeting? All right, sweet, I can skip this slide then. But just let's get a raise of hands of how many of you all have tried animation retargeting in Unreal. Wow, I should skip like half my slides, and I'm not kidding. Well, so yeah, for those of you who don't know, it is the transfer of animations from one character to another, and mainly around the differences of your skeleton, whether that is your names of your bones or the hierarchical order, or the number of bones will determine kind of the different methods of retargeting that you could use within Unreal. So what we're going to go over today is what does Unreal offer? I'm going to talk about the history of retargeting. I think it's good to paint kind of a picture of how we came to where we are and kind of what conclusions we come today. And then talk about the new 5.6 features. And then talk about the future of retargeting, the name of this talk. So let's talk about the history. So the first method that was introduced was translation retargeting and retarget source. So in Unreal, you know, there's the skeleton asset, which that you can assign to multiple skeletal meshes, which mainly handles different character proportions, like a short, tall, or medium. And from there, you want to be able to transfer your animations from, say, like a medium character to your short or tall. However, when you do that, naturally, without setting these options, it will squash or stretch the character, right? So within your skeleton, you can assign different translation retargeting options, so that way it doesn't do that. And then if you have animations that are authored to the specific proportion, say the short or the tall, in your animation, you can set the proportion to be those. So that way it maintains the original source that it was authored on. And this is heavily used by Fortnite. This is one of the things that powers the Fortnite cosmetic system. And yeah, it's a very performant manner, especially within the gaming industry. The next set is copy post from mesh and set leader pose. So this isn't necessarily needed if you have, say, like different skeletons in the sense of like if they're the same base hierarchy, right? So it doesn't matter if you have it assigned to the same skeleton, you can use kind of different skeletons as long as they have the same base hierarchy and matching bones. It just copies the output pose from one to the other. And within the anim blueprint, the copy post from mesh node is super powerful because then you can do additional animation logic afterwards to make sure this does not respect the translation of retargeting settings because it's just copying the pose from one to the other. And it only copies matching bones, so everything else will be in the reference pose. And again, this is heavily, heavily used by the Fortnite cosmetic system with all the different character parts and outfits. The second one is set leader pose. This is a blueprint node, and this is heavily used in metahumans. So basically this has one leader pose that you've assigned, and you can assign it to any number of skeletal mesh poses or skeletal mesh components. Just to be clear, though, the child skeletal meshes can't have like custom animations that get assigned unless if it's on the post-process anim blueprint. Now, those previous methods are still supported within UE5 and are heavily used. I wanted to show this deprecated one to kind of show the history, which is the Retarget Manager. This was mainly used to handle different skeletons, and you would assign a rig asset to do single bone map assignments. And it would have some auto mapping for humanoid characters, mainly one template skeleton, the mannequins. And you could create rigs for custom characters, sort of. It wasn't really that user-friendly. You could provide a base pose, again, not that user-friendly, and it always duplicated assets and then retargeted. So it was always an offline process. So those were all the options provided in UE4. And we can take a look at these limitations. For skeletal meshes that uses the same skeleton, it was performant, but it limited design at times. There was no guarantee for contact points to be maintained across the different proportion characters, especially as you go to extreme poses. and limited support for different skeletons. As we said, there was no support really for more or less bones. It was single bone mappings. Again, maintaining contact points is a crucial part with retargeting. And there was no previewability. You could just set it and be like, all right, let's pray this works. It doesn't. All right. I got to reauthor all of these. And also, there was no runtime retarget support. I'll always duplicate, bloating up the memory of a project, etc. So in UE5, we wanted to expand retargeting as animation was a huge pillar, and we wanted to make sure that we delivered the best-in-class tools. And retargeting was a must-win for UE5. And this first one, which technically was introduced in UE4, but was more used in UE5, was kind of like the first step of it, which is compatible skeletons. Animations that are assigned from one skeleton, you want to be able to use them on another one, especially if they basically are the same skeleton, right? So compatible skeletons allows you to do that. And so, for example, you look at the metahuman skeleton versus the mannequins or the UE5 mannequin or Echo. They all share the base skeleton, the same base skeleton. You just want to make sure, hey, I don't want to have to duplicate and retarget all of this. You just want to have one asset work to the other without any additional fluff or nodes. So that's what allowed us to do that, which is it's a great feature. Highly recommend it. And then what I call the extreme, or well, the thing that takes care of everything to an extent, which is the IK rig and IK retargeter. So this is where the source and the target has a IK rig or some sort of character definition that you define the different parts and the IKs, and then you map them inside IK retargeter. And the main point with this is that any skeleton, any skeletal meshes, or any pose can be transferred and shared. And when we had initially had this, it was kind of 5 phases: the retarget pose, the pelvis phase, FK, IK, and post. So let's break those down. Retarget pose. So retarget pose, you just define the starting pose that the retarget would start from. It doesn't matter what the rough pose is, A pose, T pose, or like this meerkat, which doesn't fit within the biped poses. You just, as long as you set it to match or to be where you want it to start from, it should transfer. And we added some auto-align options more recently, and you could also edit the source pose, especially for skeletons that don't come in correctly in Unreal. We don't want you to have to completely re-import the mesh, right? So you can edit, like, change the facing direction or raise the hips up so that way it's not on the ground. So here is a video of how you can author that. This is in 5.4. A lot of these videos will be in 5.4 until we talk about the 5.6 features. But you see I can do single bone manipulations to rotate the pose and just to kind of match more to the source. But I also have some auto-align options. So this auto-align is based off of the chain maps that I've set in the FK, which we'll go over in a second. And I can reset all, and I can kind of see the differences as I apply the said pose. So if I play a animation with just the default ref pose, you'll see that it looks fine, but it looks a little bit weird, the starfish, right? I kind of want to define the bent elbows, right? Maybe some parts of the bent knees. So now I apply that said pose, you can see that I get a much better result. Next is pelvis. So this was formerly called retarget root. We are changing it in 5.6 to pelvis because root is an overused term in animation. But basically what this is, it just defines the base motion of the character, right? Especially because you have a couple of different sources, whether that's from games or mocap. They might not always have a root bone. You just want to define what the base part of the character pose is, and most of the time it's the pelvis or hips. So you define it in the source and the target IK rig, and then it copies the motion from the source to the target. And you have some options to affect that motion and how that remaps. So in case you don't know how to do it, you just right-click, set the pelvis. So I'll set it to that. And you'll see that it's assigned there. And on the target, I do it again on the starfish. So it's just the center of the starfish. And we'll go into retargeter. And you'll see I have no motion playing on the starfish, right? But I can access some settings and just turn on the pelvis phase and go ahead and play the animation. And you'll see that we get the base motion across. And that's the first step, just so that way we say, okay, this is the base, this is where I want to start from, so that way we can go to the other parts. And I have additional options here. I can make sure that it's blended to source, meaning that it will copy the exact same as the source motion. I can scale the horizontal and vertical, which is great for if you want to scale the motion, especially for different stride characters. And also I have the translation and rotation offsets. I can decide if this would affect my IK eventually. Next is the FK phase, which is probably the start of where this gets really interesting. So within IK rig, we just define the different limbs of the source and the target. It doesn't matter the number of bones. We just define, hey, this is an arm, this is a leg, spine, head, neck, et cetera, et cetera. And it just copies the motion, at least the default method will copy the motion based off of curve length and normalize it and create the rotations as a part of that. So how do we define those? Well, within IK rig, you can select some bones and just right click and add a retarget chain to define the start and the end of that part of the character. Now, I'm lazy. I don't want to do this for every part of the character, right? So on the top bar, we have an easy way to auto-create retarget chains for common bipedal characters. So I can just hit that button, and voila, we get all my chains. Don't have to do it manually. And however, for custom characters, you will have to do some definition, especially. So if we go to the starfish, I already defined some. I mean, it's not too bad, it's 5 limbs there. And so I have all of those set, and now I go to Retargeter, and I have my chain mapping panel, and I can go in and say, all right, I want to turn the phase on, and I want to auto map. Now, we have some ways to auto map, fuzzy string names if you want to. I do it exact because I just want to make sure, hey, I know exactly what I'm working with. And there we go. We've got base FK retarget, which is pretty nice, especially with all the different bone lengths. I can also assign the same source chain on multiple target chains if I want to, which is kind of interesting, especially as you deal with multi-limb characters, right? And you're targeting, say, from mocap, right, a bipedal character to something else. And I have all sorts of different settings that I can manipulate within the FK. So the default rotation mode is what I mentioned, but there's other rotation modes that if you like to get a bit more accurate or more better result, depending on your use case. And you can also have some translation retargeting as well to better handle translation animations if you like. And you can even turn off the FK per chain if you want to. So you don't have to do, it's a global option and also a per chain option. And just to show how this works with, say like 18 bones compared to 3 bones, I have this Spelunko creature from our content examples. And you can see that as I select the right leg, you can see I mapped it there, and we get the generic motion across. So it doesn't matter the number of bones. We just care about the generic motion, and we just copy it from one part of the character to the other. Obviously, it's going to look a little weird from a bipedal character to a 3-legged character, but hopefully you see the power of this. Next is IK. So we have a couple of different IK solvers, but the main one that we use in retargeting is full body IK. And this is a position-based solver that handles multiple bone chains that's defined with a base with multiple IK effectors. And this is compatible for any sort of skeleton and any sort of character. So again, trying to make sure the limitations of the skeleton doesn't really matter with the FK and now with the IK. And you can have different solver settings to kind of craft how you want your IK behavior to be, whether that is setting specific preferred angles per bone or updating the mass multiplier because you have a much larger character, or different stiffness settings so that way you can achieve a pose. This is heavily used in a lot of our demos, if you've seen over the past years, especially with slope warping. And it's because full body IK is great for affecting an existing pose, but it's not always the best at creating a pose from scratch. And then within IK Retargeter, we have the IK Retarget phase, and all we're doing is just moving the goals. We're not changing any part of the solver or any part of the settings. We're just affecting and seeing how your set IK solver in IK rig is just moving those effectors. And we have some options to try to maintain contact, like blend to source, stride warping, and speed planting. So let's take a look at that. So here we have the starfish again with a simple FK retarget. And now I want to add IK to it. So I'm going to go into my target IK rig. And I have an IK rig already set up. And you can see that I have my goals and some bone settings. So I could select the solver and edit the properties within there to kind of get the behavior that I want. And I can preview the IK directly inside the IK rig. And you can see that I have that, that elbow bend that I've defined with some preferred angles. I've locked some axis so that way it doesn't bend a certain way. And I can also affect like, all right, I had it at -30, maybe I want it a little bit different, just so that way I can actually define what that elbow pose bend actually looks like. And I've also set the chain depth to be set to 3, so that way it doesn't affect the other parts of the body, right? So it's only affecting that arm, and then as soon as I pull away, it'll start affecting the rest of the body. So now we'll turn that on, and it might not be clear what the difference is immediately, but as we look at the chain mapping and look at the IK chains, I have some settings within my IK with blended source on. And when we turn that off, you'll see that the legs, the feet go into the ground. We want to make sure that they maintain the same height as the source, because that way, we can kind of keep the plantedness and keep the same height. So that way it's always, maintaining contact with the ground. And we have some debug drawings, so that way I can, see what those IK goals look like and apply kind of different settings like static offset, or scale if I wanted to or needed for the IK. So here I'm just saying, all right, well, let me move these, in kind of different directions, see how it goes, and provide kind of a low-level manipulation. If we want higher levels of manipulation, we can go into stride warping. So stride warping is basically going to scale out the IK goals, so that way we can lengthen or shorten our strides if we want to. I can make sure that this only affects the chains that I want to. So let's say in that I don't want to affect the arms, I just want to affect the legs. So I have that. So that way I can tweak in the manners that I want to. Lastly is post. So post retarget phase is kind of like a catch-all. This was designed to mainly handle the results of after the retarget. So things like IK bones, or in games you might need to regenerate your root motion, or figure out how you want to copy your root motion. So after the retargeted result. So we have some of these, so that way you have kind of just more options after the retarget, because you don't necessarily want to pin your IK bones, during the FK phase, right? And those are all the operations that we have in 5.5. And for runtime retarget, we have the retarget pose from mesh node. This is exactly the same as copy pose. You take in any sort of source skeletal mesh component, and you can use this to have a runtime retarget or a live performance retarget within performance capture. And works exactly the same as copy pose, and it takes a retargeter asset, and you can use blueprints to change different retarget profiles and the properties of the retarget. So let's see how this works within the gameplay animation sample. So if you're not familiar with this project, this was released in 5.4, I believe, and you can get it off our launcher and fab. If you run over this blue icon while you're in Pi, you can actually get an editor utility widget that plays with with the different characters, and these are all the kind of ship characters that you see here with the Paragon twin shooter, and then you can also see the comparison between the source, which is the middle, and to the targets with the UE4 and UE5 mannequins. And just for fun, I thought I'd throw in this meerkat and see how it gets retargeted. Which, by the way, this was a VFX skeleton, so bones with all over the place, right? That's a bit different from a game skeleton. And you can see that I can even preview this, which is a sneak peek with what I'm going to go over later. You can actually preview this directly within Retargeter and see how it affects it, and change your settings as you go. So that way you can craft how your retarget is with the runtime. Thank you. And obviously, we've heard a lot of feedback after the initial release of 5.0, and we wanted to make it really easy to retarget bipeds. So we cleaned up the duplicate and retarget dialog to where we have this new window of cleaning, basically making clear retargeters. It supports all the common bipedal skeletons from multiple providers and creates either new animations or automatically creates the new IK rigs and retargeter assets. And these are all accessible actions within those editors as well as kind of as steps. So just a quick video. We'll go into any animation, and I can just say retarget animations. And I can go and select, say any target. So this is a metahuman. And I can go look at any animations that are, within this list. And I can just immediately preview them in the dialogue. No more praying, oh my God, hopefully this works. You can just see in the dialogue and say, all right, that doesn't work. Maybe I want to export the retargeter assets. If you already have a retargeter asset that you've set up that you like, you don't have to use the auto. We just turn it on by default, but you can just provide one yourself. But in case if you do want the auto targeter and you still want access to those, especially for your runtime retargets or performance capture, you can just create them and immediately open it up, and you get the same exact settings that you saw within the viewport. I know, revolutionary, right? Same results between both viewports. We don't turn on IK by default because we want to make sure that we fit all the different use cases as possible. So when you export it, you can turn on IK and do all the different IK effects that you need. I'll leave this for a little bit, but these are all the skeletons that we support within the auto retargeter. If there is one that you find that you use quite often and is very popular, let me know. You can just send me the FBX file, and we'll make sure that it gets supported. For any mocap providers in the audience, if you see that there's any updates, please let us know. We'll be happy to update accordingly. But like any software, there are limitations. It was very difficult to grow different retarget behaviors. You saw how complicated the editor was while we added more features. It was just getting a bit too overwhelming for our users, and we wanted to promote better discoverability and better usability. Also, it was getting harder for us to add new retarget features because we were so stuck in these kind of ways. Also, while there are ways to maintain contact resolution, we want better ways, and we want to think about how we improve that moving forward, especially within different scale characters and characters with different lengths. And then scale, again, retargeting across different scale characters can be pretty difficult. Especially if you get skeletons and characters from the marketplace, you don't know what they look like immediately. It could be really small or really large, and then you have to fit it back. It gets too difficult to work with. So now let's talk about what's new in 5.6. So we talked about these phases before, right? And it went in this order, but it was difficult to scale. What if I wanted, again, scaling? What if I wanted to scale any part of the motion? What if I wanted to handle prop interaction? What if I wanted just copy pose, just a straight, simple retarget, without any of this fluff? What if I want additive pose offsets? Additional IK goal movements? Feet refreshment or enhancement? There's still some stuff that we would like to do to make sure that we maintain context there. What about facial animation? There's been a lot of questions about this. How do we support facial? Any future work that we can scale up further with different behaviors. Or just simply, what if I just wanted to pin some bones, that's not an IK bone, just before anything, right? Why do I always have to be in post to just pin a couple of bones? Well, phases are no more. We are no longer doing phases. We can change the order by operations. We have this. We have this operation stack, and you can add, as many operations as you want. Custom or third-party developers can also write their own retarget operations and supply those as plugins, and they'll go on the stack. And there are certain ops that can have sub-operations like IK, because additional IK goal movements. And this has a whole new editor interface that you can interact with all the different ops. And something to note, IK Retargeter does not need IK rigs to transfer motion anymore. If you want certain operations where it's like, I don't really need IK rig at all, I just know I have this operation that will go from this character into this character and I have my own system, you don't need to have references to IK rig, which is awesome. Or at least it's optional. So let's look at this new interface. You'll see the op stack on the top left, and you'll see all the operations stacked from top down, and that will go in that order. There is no more chain mapping panel on the bottom right, and we move the asset browser to the bottom left. And you'll see as I select that op, my details panel updates, and I get all the settings on there, so no more buttons on the toolbar to access those. You just select an op, you see your settings, and you go. You can always go back to your asset settings by clicking either in empty areas in the viewport or the op stack or back on the toolbar so that way you can edit for a certain previewability. And also, as you go into like the retarget FK change, you'll see that the chain mapping is just in the op. You can just select it and you'll see only your FK settings because why do you need to see every chain setting, right? You just only focus on the settings that you want. So you still have the access, the same access as you had before. It's just condensed, and you just focus on what you like. And if we go to Run IK Rig, you'll see that I can change my mapping directly within here, but I don't have access to the settings that I had before. That's because it's in this sub-op. Because we'll have different sub-ops that we can kind of scale up and have different settings on those IK chains specifically. Again, root motion, remap curve, you see, as I select, we get all the different options there, which is awesome. And you'll see that it goes in this top-down order, so it goes pelvis motion, retarget FK shades. If there's a number shades there with the run IK rig, that's because it's going to the sub-ops first and then going into the backup and then down. I can reorder all of these ops in any manner that I want. Obviously, yes, this could cause undesirable results, but it's completely flexible and up to you. You don't have to go into order that we have defined. You can add, let's say, for example, you wanted to add another FK op. You could do that. Just to show for retarget poses, it's still in the same bits. You still have your hierarchy, you still have your button, but we're thinking about how we can put that into an op in the future. So again, you can just add more ops, say the FK chain. I can have another different character definition if I wanted to for just that op. So, or I could have another IK op, right, and have different IK solvers. So it's just to add more flexibility, more kind of modularity across, so that way we can just add as we go. As I add some sub-ops, you can see I can have multiple stride warps. So let's say I wanted just a stride warp for the legs, but I want a different stride warp for my arms, right? So instead of just one stride warp, you can have multiple. And you can change that for, say, like, spiders or octopuses with kind of different number of limbs, and you can just assign the pairs and go. I don't show this in the video, but you can rename ops. So you can, clearly find the op that, you want, and you're like, okay, these are just the legs or just the arms. So how does this help? Well, we've added source scaling. So now you can scale your source motion down more proportionally to your target mesh. And this works in conjunction with the IK ops and the pinbone ops. This is a single operation, meaning you can't have multiples. So let's see how this works. So we've seen this before. I have a different proportion target mesh. And I see that, hey, I want to maintain this hand contact, right? Now, if I turn off IK rig, I can see like the FK does okay, but I want to add some IK and let me try blending the source, which I think we all know what's going to happen, where my little goblin here is just going to be all stretched out because the source is just so much bigger than the target, right? So what I'm going to do is I'm just going to put my goblin back, to match the source, and I can go and add a scale source op and just move that up to the top. And I can go and just scale the source motion down to be more proportional to my target. So I can say, yeah, that looks about right. It's like 45%, but maybe I want to go a little lower. So that way I can get it match a bit more. And I'm mainly looking at not necessarily the whole scale, I'm just looking at the IK goal specifically, right? So that way I can see how that transfers across to the character. And now as I go across the frame, you can see that that hand is pretty sticky, it doesn't go through the floor, and that looks pretty good. And I can look at other animations and see how this goes. So let's say I go look at this climb animation. That looks a lot better than the whole stretched out and trying, to reach the points where the source was, right? So this is super powerful. Now let's talk about how this works with Pinbone. So Pinbone has some new options to mainly handle prop interactions. So we have new options to copy the local position and handle how we want to relatively scale. And this combines well with the two previous ops. So here's an example with two Paragon characters where we have the Revenant on the left, which is the source, and the Pirate Skeleton on the right. And they both have hats. So I want to just transfer the animation for that little hat animation from my source to my target. So if I look at the pin bones, which I can go and say, all right, we're just going to copy the hat to the hat. And I think we know where this is going to go, where the hat animation is going to transfer, but we know it's going to be copied exactly to the same height as my source. So this isn't great. At least the hat animations come across, right? Yeah, let's see if we can do something better. If we look at the translation options, we can say copy local position and keep the relative scale. So I'll go ahead and set it to that whenever I do it. And that already looks much better. So it's keeping the relative distance from the initial lengths of the ref pose. And we can see that that looks pretty good, but my hand contact isn't quite there, right? Maybe I want to ensure that I absolutely copy the same source motion that I have for my hand, right? So what I can do is if I turn on my IK rig, which again, you can just turn on and off and kind of preview and debug a bit that way. I can go to my retarget IK goals and say, all right, I'm just gonna have blend to source on, and I'm gonna play that, and now we're gonna have the opposite effect, right? The hat transfers and the hand transfers, but it maintains exactly where the source is. So this is where I can add some source scale, so that way the IK is more proportional from the source to my target. So I'll turn that on, and we can see that's already much better. It's maintaining those contacts, and the hat animation is coming across, and that looks pretty good. I might have to do a little bit of edits, some tweaks with mesh penetration, but overall that's pretty solid. And we can see some different animations being played with those settings on. Obviously the hat pivot is going to be a little bit different, but maybe you can do some adjustments afterwards, just so that way it gets a little bit more centered. But yeah, that looks pretty good. Retarget pose improvements. Additive poses are now a thing. So you can add these as ops, and you can do them in any part of the ops. Say, let's say you wanted to do an additive pose between the FK and the IK. You can do that. And we have some additional alignment options as well, especially if you have characters that have kind of a same skeleton, but just are different lengths. So let's take a look at this. My legs on the starfish are a little too close together. And I could edit this with the base retarget pose, or I could edit this with IK, but I don't really want to because maybe I want to keep those settings for other edits that I may want. So here, I'm just going to create a new pose where I'm just going to spread the legs out. Right, so I'm take the left leg and the right leg and just spread them out, and I'll spread out like maybe about that much, and yeah, I think that's about right. Let's see how this looks, and I'm gonna go back to well, that's gonna look awkward obviously, so I'm gonna make sure I set it back to the default, and I can go and set the additive pose and just assign the pose that I already authored. And we can see that I can weight this too. So, I have a bit finer control, right? And this is great for, things like fingers or things like, if you needed some neck adjustments or head adjustments afterward. And remember, All of these ops are reorderable. So I can add another additive pose op and just put them higher, put them lower, et cetera, and completely weight them. So super powerful. Some things to note, we also have copy-paste pose. So this is bringing the tech that we're talking about with copy post from mesh directly into Retargeter. So you have the ability to just say, hey, if I'm in a game and I have all of these characters that are being retargeted, maybe I always want to use copy post from mesh. I always want to use retarget post from mesh, but I still want the logic of copy pose. You can have that directly in Retargeter and then use retarget profiles to turn them off if you want to, depending on the characters that you switch. Also, side note, because of all the changes that we've done within Retargeter, there used to be a checkbox to copy the source curves in Retarget pose. That's no more. We put it directly in the Retargeter in the copy curves op, or the remap curves op. So that's turned on by default. You just have to add that, and it's a part of the default ops when you select and create those. So just I wanted to shout out to the MetaHuman team and also the AnimViz team that's downstairs at the expo. All of this within MetaHuman Creator, as you saw in the keynote, and also the AnimViz stage is using Retargeter. It's all live. You can just see it across the different proportions. And we're looking to improve this moving ahead because we want to make sure that you can do all sorts of scales, all sorts of skeletons. And yeah, I just wanted to give a shout out because they've been a great partner and collaborator within this process. So let's talk about the title of the talk. What's next? What's the future, right? We've shown all the cool stuff in 5.6 and shown all the modularity that's provided. What's next? Well, because we've modularized it a bit, we can do so much more. Let's talk about the limitations. Right now, the limitations are mass scalable retargeting. How do we handle retargeting characters on a large scale? Not just the characters themselves, but across hundreds or thousands of characters. How do we do it to where we could eventually have what I call one retargeter to rule them all? All right? You don't want to deal with so many retarget assets. You just want, maybe a couple or maybe even just one, right? That you can just switch and flip and work accordingly. And then how do we art direct our retargets? How do we stylize them on custom characters? If I want a really squishy character, how do I retarget that across from mocap, right? And a lot of this is already being done by our customers and even our internal teams, but we feel like we can expand this further. So here's a list of everything that we're thinking about and possibly working on. For mass scalable retargeting, we're looking at retarget profile authoring. This is the ability to author basically groups or collections of retarget properties directly in the Retarget Editor, so that way you can flip them on and off as you do a runtime retarget. So especially with different characters, you may want IK or you may not want IK, or you may want different FK settings. You may want different retarget poses, right? So it's the ability to scale up at a high level and author it directly in the Retarget Editor. Something we're talking about is spatially aware retargeting. So as you go from, say, a character that is a bit skinny and then a big belly character, we want to make sure that as the hand goes down and intersects with the belly, that it's spatially aware. So being able to move the IK so that way it doesn't interpenetrate across meshes and other contact resolutions. So we're looking at how we handle spatially awareness within Retargeter. For my game licensees, I know FBIK performance has been a big topic. That's something that we're looking at to improve. Another lower level, but equally important, is auto characterization. We have common bipedal skeletons that are supported, but what about my octopus? What about my gorilla? What about my giraffe, right? Like, how do we automatically characterize across any number of skeletons so that way we could just quickly get to our retarget faster? Because as an artist, I don't really want to worry about that. I just want animations from one to the other. Debugging, as you see with the op stack, it's super powerful, so we feel like that we can improve the debugging much better. We can look at the performance and see, okay, that op, that's not performant. We can turn that off, if we're on a different platform, but then turn it back on a higher end platform. At the keynote, you had saw the new Unreal Animation Framework. We're looking to integrate with that because it increases performance across multiple skeletal mesh components to where that we can have one anim instance across the entire character rather than multiple across multiple skeletal meshes. And then abstract skeleton, the eventual removal of uSkeleton, so that way animations can just play across any sort of skeleton without having to always reference the skeleton asset. Then arc-directable retargeting. How do we stylize our retargets on custom characters? We're looking at local scaling of goals. While global scale is great, it's not awesome for characters with really tiny arms or characters with really, really long legs or different length spines, necks, etc. So we're looking at local scaling of IK goals, so that way when you apply it, you can just kind of scale it back. It's like, oh, okay, that matches back to my tiny arm or my longer leg. Facial retargeting. We are collaborating with metahumans to make sure that we get facial retargeting in the Retarget Editor, especially with the push for stylized facial rigging from the control rig team and animating an engine. We want to be able to say, hey, I recorded dialogue in metahuman animator. I want to transfer that to my stylized character and add some deformers, add some other things of that sort, and get a really good performance across, right? Especially with lip sync. Op weighting, you saw it a little bit in the video, but we have weights in the ops. It's just they're not quite ready, so it just displays as the 1.0 there. But we're looking at op weighting, so that way you can just add it op, and it's just like, yeah, I want that to be about 50%, or I want this to be 75 or whatnot. Foot and heel enhancements, we know this is something that we really want to handle, especially as we want to handle, say, like different kinds of shoes, like high heels or sandals or flip-flops of that sort. So we want to be able to add different foot and heel enhancements. Another one that I'm excited about is ML post correction. So if you've provided a set piece of data point to where it's like, hey, these are the poses that I want to make sure that this character hits as it approaches a certain angle for the bones. I want there to be some sort of ML post correction that happens as a part of the retargeted results, so that way it maintains exactly what I had authored, right? Instead of like, hey, that elbow, now that's interpenetrating. I could use IK to help with that, but if I just do a little bit of a correction, all right, cool. Automatic corrects for me. That's great. Stylization. We're looking at how we handle different kinds of stylization within Retargeter. This is kind of a bit more general and nebulous, but we're really thinking quite heavily about how we handle this across all the different characters that we like. And eventual sequencer integration. There's a lot of great tools within sequencer and control rig and deformers and animating in Unreal, and we want to be able to integrate that further eventually, and either within the Retarget Editor or outside and directly within sequencer. So if you want to take a look at the 5.6 roadmap, all the items that I talked about aren't quite on the forward-facing, but I'll add them after Fest. But if you want to take a look at and provide some feedback on the op stack, we'll happily take that. In the middle, there is a full-body IK guide written by Kieran Ritchie, the developer behind IK Rig and Retargeter. He provides a great tutorial and guide about what you might want to set up your full-body IK for kind of different characters. And there is a retargeting for bipeds guide that I've made. It is still using the 5.4 stuff. I'll eventually update that to show the op stack and how you can do additional manipulations. But take a look at those and feel free to leave some feedback on there if you have any more tutorial ideas or questions. And I just want to give a shout out to the team behind all of this. This was a huge refactor within Retargeter, and it could not have been done without any of these people. They've been fantastic, especially with the new UX and testing all their regressions. If you see any bugs, please let us know. We want to make sure that this is the cleanest retargeting experiences that you have had within Unreal, and make sure that you can handle all the different characters. Thank you.